Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very excited to be here with Kevin, who is a product manager at Google and one of our product school alumni. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
So today we're going to do a kind of like where are they now session where we find out what you've been up to since product school, what an average day to day is like for you, if there is such a thing, and just general fun questions like that. So to get us started, I want to know, what have you been up to since you got certified with product school?
Well, I've been doing some hiking, some paddle boarding. Oh, wait, you're asking professionally. So that too, yes. So what I've really mostly been up to is, I took the product school leadership certificate when I was working as a PM in Adobe's Creative Cloud. And since then, I've now transitioned into a new role at Google as of this spring. I've been working in the customer engagement organization for them, owning their community support platform. So think of kind of, where users that have problems with Google products go to help each other.
Nice. And can you describe what a typical day-to-day is for you now? There's no such thing as a typical day-to-day in products, but just generally speaking, what kind of things can you expect to see on your agenda?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the easiest way to describe this is probably a week to week, because as you said, there is no typical day to day as a product manager, right? So I guess in general, I'll have probably a couple of syncs every day with various stakeholders around, the related organizations to support. So, whether it is the team that manages our like partnerships with product experts that, help answer questions for other users at Google, or engineering team, or various business units, or privacy, legal, you name it. There's essentially regular syncs that we have to make sure that we're all on the same page as we move forward with whatever initiatives we're working on. Aside from the regular scheduled stuff, there's always one-offs. So say a question needs to get answered, or a problem comes up somewhere downstream, or maybe you just want to have a networking coffee chat with someone, because in these days we don't get that in the office anymore. I actually find that's actually one of the most important things to plan ahead for is, since usually as a product manager, you have a lot of soft influence and a lot of networking and sort of, day-to-day interactions that are important and meaningful to your workflow, but that's just very hard to have in a digital environment. So, I try to make time every day to either meet someone new that, I'm going to be working with in the future, or is on one of the teams that I work with, or to catch up with someone that I haven't with in a while. Outside of all the meetings, there's the actual deliverable work, PRDs, specifications, reviews, approvals, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I think that's probably a lot to digest when it comes just the work itself. But there's always other random stuff that comes up as a PM. But that's probably a good high level overview of the things to focus on.
Mm-hmm. And what was it that inspired you to pursue your product leadership certificate? Because when people get certified as a product manager for the very first time and they're landing their first job, that's an obvious connection to make. But what was it where you thought, okay, I'm already a product manager, but I need to pursue a certification? What was the inspiration behind that?
So for me, I'd say I'd been a product manager for, I guess, about 3-4 years almost at this point. And as I'm sure most of you know that are listening, and that product is different at pretty much every company that you go to. Every product team is different, even within an organization, right? Or within a company, product will be handled differently. So what I wanted to do is put a really like academic background behind all the things that I've learned, while learning sort of what the next steps would be to take my career to the next level. So I chose the product leadership certificate, and it was great. It showed me exactly what I was looking for when it came to, that, like I said, that sort of academic background, the theory, the best practice behind this crazy field that we call product.
I love that. This crazy field that we call product. We have to use that somewhere else. That's such a good phrase. Was there anything from the course that you find yourself using? Maybe not, as we said, there is no such thing as day to day, but yeah, maybe week by week. Is there anything that you took from your course that you found like super helpful or especially interesting for you?
Yeah, so a few things. I think one of the most useful I guess like units within the course were around experimentation and testing because I mean, as a product manager, experimentation, I mean, as they say, data wins arguments, right? So, having that, the ability to really have the best practice when it comes to having and designing large experiments that, you know, uh, are meaningful and accurate and are actually going for the right outputs to be able to really drive strategy is really important. It's something that I'm sure in most product jobs you get the opportunity to explore, but with product school it had like, okay, here's like the best practice behind this, right? And so it makes experimentation even that much more meaningful. And then I'd say another one is probably there was a unit in there about sort of like the different levels of product management, kind of describing really what sort of role of like a senior PM or a director or whatever, kind of like the scope of uh, really like the breadth of what is under that position, and to basically get context and say, okay, like you've worked with directors or senior PMs or VPs before, and you've seen them on a bunch of emails, but like what are they actually doing? Like that's what they're doing.
Okay, now I'm asking this next question just mostly out of personal curiosity, but I know it's something that I've seen the community getting into quite a lot. Well, to say that Google is a big name brand is a ridiculous understatement. So people are always like, well, not everyone, but when people are wondering about what it would be like to work at Google, I'm sure there are a bunch of assumptions that we all have about what it's like to work at Google. When you landed at Google, did you have assumptions, and were those challenged in any way, or was it exactly what you expected it to be?
Yeah, I think to your point, I feel like when it comes to FANG companies in general, everyone has this like, you know, a specific view that they have of it. Like you said, like this is yeah, for a lot of people, this is like the end goal of, like everyone, they want to go be a FANG PM and then, start kicking things off from there. Um, I'd say a lot of what I found I did expect. Like a big reason why personally wanted to pursue a job at Google specifically is because I was sure there'd be a lot of like institutional knowledge and learning that I could have there, where Google's in a way kind of wrote the book on a lot of product management stuff and a lot of technology, industry stuff in general. But what I wanted to do was get in there and sort of like learn from all these people that were like very experienced in the industry and have this institutional knowledge to teach me, in wholly new ways. From like before Google, I'd worked at Adobe, which is another sort of big institutional industry name, and I learned a ton there. And I know they operate very differently than Google, and I wanted to learn what that would be like. And then before that, I worked at a startup where at a startup, there is no institutional knowledge, right? It's like you're there, you're scrappy, you get stuff done kind of however you can. So really, getting that well-rounded experience was very important to me, and I definitely found that.
Excellent. And how does working as a product leader, well, as you said, you went through the leadership course. How does that compare to sort of the entry level product management roles? Did you find, even though you're already like product manager rather than senior product manager, as you've sort of moved on in your career, what are some of the growth paths that you found yourself going through?
So I'd say uh, a big thing that I had to learn when jumping into product. Before being, before being a PM, I was a consultant, and then before that, I was studying to be a software engineer. And decided I liked talking more about what we're building and why more than how we build it. Is kind of that was sort of the philosophical reason I went into sort of business when it comes to software. But I'd say uh, just to repeat, the question was, what kind of learning paths did you have to have? Yeah. So I think a big thing is learning to manage expectations of not only yourself, but like the whole team around you, and leadership in general, right? Because like everyone has ideas about what a product should be in an organization. Everyone, whether it's sales, engineering, marketing, everybody, right? And you as the PM have the keys to that backlog to be like, okay, well, like, this is what the product is, this is what it can be, this is what it should be. So being able to have those, I think, difficult conversations with people about like, look, like I know this sounds like an awesome feature that will help your life a lot, but right now we need to focus on this. And being able to handle that with grace and tact is like a soft skill that you really, develop as a PM, and I'd say kind of uniquely as a role in a company. So I've definitely gotten a lot better at that over the years. I will say it was a bit tough in my first position that I had. And then when it comes to the learnings, like I guess, like you mentioned in the product leadership certificate, I think, an interesting thing about that one versus the entry level, I assume is, like you come in with the expectation that you've already encountered all these, basically encountered all the factors of being a PM. So you can talk about it at like a higher level of, more, like I said, closer to best practice and I guess more strategically. So being able to see, honestly, what bad habits I had developed and how I could change them to become a better PM was really invaluable part of that course.
I guess it involves a lot of like introspection about like, okay, how have I been doing things? Why have I been doing things?
Yeah, it's like it's an opportunity to give yourself feedback. I know we're always looking for feedback from other people to, make our products and our professional lives better. But going through this course gave me the opportunity to kind of step back and give myself feedback and say, okay, what do I really need to work on now that I've been exposed to really what is best practice for this role?
And what would you say were some of the main mistakes that you were making on early in your career? What's the one thing that you would go back and tell yourself, like, don't do that?
I wasn't listening enough. That's the biggest thing was I was not listening enough. I had like all of these ideas, like I was saying, about how to make the product I was working on better. And, I was listening to certain folks more than others, but if I could go back and tell myself one thing, it's like step back, take your ego completely out of it and just listen, right? Listen, synthesize, and then like make a strategy based on like what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what you're reading in the data. And I would have saved myself a lot of heartache and a lot of learning.
It's such a completely underrated skill. I think we all imagine, oh, because I have ears, I know how to listen, but
Yes.
It is a skill that you have to hone. It's definitely part of the craft.
Absolutely.
So you were already working when you took your product management certificate or your product leadership certificate. How were you able to balance like working, studying, and then also having to be, an adult human being with all that comes with?
I think for one, I was, you're right. I was working while taking the course, and it was definitely difficult to manage the time management aspect of it because it is a commitment. Like when you're taking this course, you are committing a good amount of time. It was like 2 nights a week and some homework for me for each week that I was taking this. But I will say I did benefit a little bit from the fact that it was impossible in this winter to do anything social because we were all inside. So I basically just focused on product school and on my job. But I think the main thing I would tell folks that are considered taking it is, make sure you are giving it the time because this is the kind of thing where you get out what you put into it. It's not like, you're not just going for like a checkbox. If you're doing that, you're doing it the wrong way. Like there's a lot of really valuable stuff you can learn. So, take it seriously and give yourself time.
I always like to think that the hours that you have to invest in educating yourself outside of work, they pale in comparison to the hours that you'll spend either doing a better job or doing the job that you love when it's finished. So like swapping a few evenings for your dream job, like for me, it's a no-brainer. But I am biased as a member of product school. I am a little bit biased in saying that. So I've got one question for you, which is a little bit of a doozy. So feel free to take a few moments to think about it. Listeners of our podcast will definitely recognize this question. What do you think is the greatest lesson that product management has taught you?
You know what? I know the answer to this, and it goes along with kind of what I said earlier about sort of my learning journey. Being a PM has taught me to take my ego out of a situation, and that being a PM, probably the greatest thing you can get is feedback, right? Feedback from your leadership, feedback from your team, feedback from your customers, right? Feedback from your users, everything, right? And being able to take that feedback and constructively use it without feeling like, having your feelings hurt or being, having your ego get in the way of like, no, I know this, right? I know this, will make you such a better, not only a product manager, but like person in general. I found like, that skill I've been able to, I honed it in my craft of product so that I could do my job well. Like it was something, it was, I think a lot of PMs go through a similar thing where you have to basically learn to throw your ego to the side to, do what's right for the product. But, being able to translate that into your personal life as well is actually very empowering because, you can really listen to people and know what's going on around you without having your ego get in the way.
That's such great advice. Yeah. And while we're on the topic of skills, what do you think are some of the more underrated skills about being a product manager? Because when people look at it for the first time from the outside, they're thinking, oh, I need to know about wireframes and I need to do road mapping. Like there are some of the big ones that product managers need. What do you think are some of the more underrated ones that are really important, but we don't talk about them enough?
It's the whole slew of soft skills, really, because like anyone can study how to wireframe something, how to build a roadmap, how to synthesize a strategy for a product. It takes work, it takes studying, effort, but one thing that we don't talk about is how much of your role as a PM is influencing people around you that you don't directly manage, right? So, for instance, convincing your engineering team that what you're telling them to do is the right thing to do for your customers and for your business, right? Telling leadership, guiding leadership's direction when you see something that's misaligned with where the data is telling you need to go with your product, right? Having those difficult conversations with your marketing or your customer advocacy team when they say, hey, our users really need this, or hey, we really need this for our marketing ops, and being able to say, not right now, but let's see what we can do to help you, to help you meet these goals in a different way, right? So really like honing the soft skills to have those difficult conversations and have meaningful influence for people that don't directly work for you is really sort of like, that's kind of the bread and butter of actually being able to execute as a product manager, in my opinion. And it kind of what sets apart, sort of the really great PMs are the ones that can really execute on that and tap into those soft skills to really move things quickly and move things well.
Is that something that you think has been impacted by the work from home situation that a lot of PMs are finding themselves in, where when you're not in the room with people and you're not having those water cooler conversations, do you think that's made it more difficult, and how do you get around that?
Yeah, I think it has. And I think it is kind of a blessing and a curse in a way because it has made me double down on winning arguments with data, which is good. That's what you're supposed to do, right? But, you know, really like when you don't have the water cooler conversations, like there's not, you can't rely on soft influence as much. They're just really like, you got to write really good emails and you got to make sure everyone's in the right room for your meetings and you can't miss anything. But also, you miss out on the water cooler conversations where you get ideas from people. So that's why I was saying a bit earlier, I think in your first question, you asked, your second question, what does my day-to-day to look like? I set time to talk to people every day, like basically force a water cooler conversation of like, hey, here's 15 minutes. We're going to grab a coffee and we're going to chat. And whether we're chatting about our family life or about what they think about the product or about, cool technology that they just, learned about, right? It doesn't really matter, but getting those conversations in is, I think, really the only kind of manage this virtually until we can get back to the office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know no one is thrilled by the idea of organized fun in a team, but I think after a year, I think the awkwardness around it, we started to break it down a little bit. So, what do you see as sort of product's path forward with all of these changes and all of this disruption and this impact that all of this has had? How do you see the future of product management sort of evolving?
It's an interesting question because product alone is like not a super old field, right? It still is kind of new, but one thing that I have been seeing like trends of and the beginnings of is really it's kind of what product school does in a way where we have this really growing and blossoming community of PMs that are all the kind of people that can put together cool stuff, right? So I think more and more in the future, and I hope really in the future that product like communities just keep growing and keep becoming more involved, and there's like much more open, transfer of knowledge and really, really thought leadership that we can start getting from this community, right? Like I said, PM is different at every single company. And so the more we can learn from each other, the more we can all be successful. And I think we're uniquely situated as a PM community to be the kind of people that make stuff like that happen, right? So, I think in general, I'm really excited to see where the community of PMs goes after this, and particularly with the leadership of organizations like Product School, and it's unfortunate this past year all the conventions for everything have been canceled, because that was one of my favorite parts of the job too, is going and like meeting all these like interesting, thoughtful, charismatic people that are really passionate about what they do. But I think hopefully once everything goes back to normal, we can get that again. But if not, at least we have things like this where, we can virtually meet and have virtual conferences and thought leadership like that.
Yeah, at least we're all a huge community of people who are comfortable enough with technology that we can have some conversations. No one doesn't know how to get into a webinar, so at least we have that as a community. Well, I can't think of a more positive note to end on. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you everyone who joined us as well. I hope you found that as interesting as I did. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Kevin, again, thank you so much, and we'll see you all very soon.